Hub Podcast. Let's go.
You're dealing with an expert in guerrilla warfare. With a man who's the best. With guns, with knives, with his bare hands. A man who's been trained to ignore pain, ignore weather, to live off the land. His job was to dispose of enemy personnel, to kill, period. Win by attrition.
Not even the worst. That's not even the worst. When I started this, it was just all jerry-rigged and just figuring it out. It felt very much like having to do an SVT video conferencing while you're deployed.
Yeah, the things I've done to and all of us, right, to execute these virtual situations. It's they see us, right, but they don't know all the magic that's happening down here. It's like a Tetris.
It's the most amazing thing that I carry forth from my time in the military. Like, you're sitting there in a very professional brief. You're about to brief the sort of commander what you're going to do in this mission, and everybody's got their good tops on, and the commander's like, "Awesome, that's a great looking detachment, so professional." And as soon as it's over, and everybody stands up, they're in board shorts, ranger panties, and flip flops, and walk off.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to lie, that there might be a little of that happening right now. You're just like, it's fine. You're just going to see me from here up.
That's it.
So
that's
we're
right.
good.
Yeah. That's the secret to it. It's all an illusion.
Yeah, for sure.
Sarah, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it. I understand you're incredibly busy, and like every other advocate that I've had the opportunity and chance to meet, the work never stops because the mission is always ongoing. It's always enduring. It's the battle at home. So today, I want to focus on something that I know is close to you and is close to myself. It's how do we advocate not only for those that we lose to suicide, but for the survivors? How do we advocate for everybody that's involved in this? Because there's a lot of pieces to pick up in the aftermath.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a twofold question. So how do we advocate for people who have struggled but are still here? Is that what I'm understanding? Yeah. And then how do we advocate for the family members who loved one made that choice and are left behind?
Yeah.
And that those are two, in my opinion, those are like two separate sort of fights, if you will, or voices. I've been going through this thought process. So, I do a lot of advocacy work or, speaking out in terms of our veterans and supporting them both just in brain health and mental health. But I'll be honest, I've taken kind of a step back the last couple of months because it just wears on you and it kind of plays on you. And so I've had to kind of take a step back to be like, get a breather. And I'll address kind of the service members, if you will, first, the ones that are struggling, because we know this is a huge issue. There are so many organizations out there that have mission statements that state they are supporting our veterans, and there's many of them doing amazing things. We also constantly hear this whole buddy check on a buddy, check on your buddy. I've said it. And I'm like, but what does that mean? And so this is just my recommendation, if you will. And it's going to sound really simple, but it's going to be very difficult for some of us to execute. And because the military loves acronyms, let's refer to this as SUSY. And it's speak up, show up, and settle in. And what I mean by that is speak up. And what I don't mean by that is don't necessarily be like, hey man, how you doing? Because that's too easily met with I'm fine, it's good, it's all good.
That's
I would like to see
that.
Yeah, and that's where it's like, this is where the supporters, right? Those of us, spouses, first responders, friends, caretakers, have to dip your toe in and be like, hey, you don't really seem like yourself. You seem like you might be struggling with some stuff that might be difficult to talk about. Is that how you feel? I mean, get in there with the question. Hey, I'm always around. I would love, for you to just kind of unload on me and be your ear. I think how they respond to those questions will also tell you a lot, even if they still respond with a good or I'm fine. Show up. What does that mean? It means physically show up. So go to their house with coffee, take them to lunch, offer to go on a walk, physically be there. I can say from my experience as a griever, this happened to me. And this, I guess, can answer the question a little twofold in the sense that I am very aware of the people who spoke up and showed up for me. And that's not to take away from anybody who maybe didn't do that. But when people showed up, there are times I welcomed them in, and there were times I didn't welcome them in. And that's what's going to be hard for the people who are doing this work, is when you show up to their door and you're greeted with a no, that can be hard to take, but it might just be a no for today. It might be a no for the week or for the month, but just keep going back and showing up, because at some point they might let you in, and it might even be years down the road, but you just don't forget the people who showed up. You just don't.
Yeah.
And then when they do let you in, then here comes the settle in. And settle in means settle in for whatever it is they're about to dump on you, and don't meet it with accolades or kind of these soft landings like, you're so strong, you're going to get through this, you're brave to take this on, just listen.
Yeah. Active
if
listening.
if anything, just confirm maybe how they might be feeling. I can see how you would feel that way. That must be really hard. I think we're in a world where talking about the emotional stuff is really hard, and humans were kind of always quick to kind of bandage it up, kind of that way. The true work is just listening and being open to it. So I think in terms of our veterans, when we say check on a buddy, I would like to see people speak up, show up, and settle in more often. And I don't know if I want to use the word aggressively, but in a very more assertive way.
Yeah.
In terms of the family members, oh man, if there's anything I've learned, grief is an ugly beast.
Yeah.
And it's ugly before it gets beautiful.
And it's different for everybody.
It's so different.
The old 7-step model that you might have heard if you were, in the military, and the, chaplain briefs you that PDF or PowerPoint with 7 clean-cut steps, and it's like, hey, this is how you grieve your buddies that you lost, and then move on. It doesn't really necessarily work. And modern studies and science and great thinkers and champions of mental health have all advocated for the understanding that it's not a linear process and you check each box. It's maybe you revisit it. And one thing that I've noticed is if you've lost people in the military, it's kind of connected to a season. So summertime, you got guys that maybe act out. Maybe you get more risky in your behavior. Maybe you're getting emotional and you don't know how to, and I'm speaking from experience. You don't know until you sit down and talk to somebody, and then you put it together. It's like, oh shit, how many friends have you lost in these particular months? Like, and then that brings up the understanding of like, oh shit, if we do a memorial ceremony, I'm going to feel this. It's going to be a retracing, and it's not feeling like, why can't I get this right? Why can't I finish my grief cycle? It's understanding that, fuck, the right thing will pop up and you'll miss a friend. And it's understanding that it's okay to grieve. It's okay to cry. Like it's something that we all should have gotten a really awesome, like, curriculum on, but we never got.
Yeah, in some ways, I don't think the military could have predicted the way so many losses over the years would affect people. Not that they get a pass, but everyone's learning here. Those cycles of grief are an interesting one. I think they apply really well to a family member who was sick for a long time, perhaps, or someone older in age. But for so many of us, you and I and our friends, my fellow widows and I refer to it as out of timeline deaths, meaning, my husband was in his 40s. Like, he really wasn't supposed to die yet, as many of our friends. So it makes it hard. It makes it really hard that you had a life planned. And so for sure, you boomerang through those kind of cycles of grief. And I had a friend ask me recently, is it always going to feel this way? And I think we all grieve differently, and I've seen that in my fellow friends, but I think there becomes if you can find somewhat healthy coping mechanisms, and I'm a big advocate of therapy and everybody going to therapy, then you hopefully can find a place where the grief just sits in you and it's where you carry it always. It's always there. You can revisit it at will, but you're a little stronger to carry it.
Yeah, it's carrying that rucksack, and if you continuously put more trauma and more stuff on top of it, it's going to get infinitely heavier. But if you take a break, talk to somebody, maybe you can process a little bit and learn to pass off some of that weight. And then when you end your time with that specific therapist and you move forward, and then if you have a hiccup or have another issue down the road, you stop by, get help again. Like, that's just a journey. That's life. It doesn't just end. It doesn't just like, oh, I'm going to be putting this away, I'll never have to revisit it. There's no magic wand. It's just learning to adapt. In your lived experience, in your life, how did you go from being able to find closure, at least to the point where you can move forward, and then start advocating and helping others?
Well, I'll be the first to say I probably started not at a good time.
And you know what? That's exactly what I found. The moment we feel good enough, just good enough, we want to help everybody else.
So I recently had this. So I will say, I think my upbringing has a lot to do with my personal resilience and grit. I was a military kid. I moved multiple times. I went to tons of schools, and that in itself just makes you pretty resilient.
Yeah.
It gives you the ability to just adapt, perhaps more fluidly. But with that being said, I will also say I consider myself a stove toucher. And I recently came up with this analogy. My girlfriends loved it. I was like, a fellow widow said, "Why do I have to do all the things to know?" And I said, "Because you and I are stove touchers." She's like, "What do you mean by that?" And I was like, basically, I have to do it, experience it, feel it, taste it, all of it, to know if it's something I want to do. Where there's other people, I refer to them as, knee deep in the wave pool. And those are the people who in life, they're living life, but they're also foreshadowing or can see when the waves are coming, and they decide how much they want to engage. Like, I don't really want to go all the way in on that. I'm not really ready. Yeah. I think I lacked some of those boundaries in the beginning. And I just felt passionately. I mean, I still love Chad so much. And I just can see the other widows and how much they loved their person. I can also see our current spouses who are struggling to support the person they love. And I just so passionately did not want someone else to join the chair next to me. So it was like, well, what can I do? How can I share my story in the hopes that maybe it will help someone else? I will say I think it's come at a pretty huge cost personally, but I wouldn't change it and I wouldn't take it back, because I think some good has come from it. And if it has, then great.
Yeah, no, we underestimate how much of a cost it really puts on our health and strains us mentally. Like, being available, being of service to others at all hours of the night, all hours of the day, takes a huge toll. And then that begets more stress and can lead to more trauma. Like, your body does not operate well when it's overstressed.
Yeah, I've definitely had, my closest friends have seen it, but I don't show it to other people, but I've definitely had moments of pretty dark times for myself personally, even while you're trying to work and do all this good and it's straining you. I think I also underestimated the position it would put my children in. And I'm not sure I gave that enough credit to begin with. Both of my kids are amazing kids, and they carry their grief differently. And I think sometimes me being forward in front in the Chad 1000X, as great as it is, I think it's brought some challenges on our family. So yeah, it's come at a cost.
Yeah. No, taking on these monumental tasks, it doesn't leave you unscathed. It's another thing to deal with. So how do you prioritize yourself now in this time where it's like, okay, like I have been championing, I've done great things, I've taken care of others. How do we put the focus back on ourselves?
Yeah.
There's a lot of us out there that need that message.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about my own personal experience. I mean, I do the best I can to kind of give back into myself and the things I like to do. I know people probably see me as an extrovert, but I think I'm actually an introvert. I spend a lot of time by myself. That's how I recharge. Like I really have to be alone. Or like maybe one other person, but I don't thrive on lots of people or big groups. So I definitely lean that way. Not to get all hippie woohoo, but
no, this is the perfect place to do it. This is security.
One of the people I've followed or read his stuff is like Ram Dass, and he says like, we're all here to help carry each other home. Right. And that's just kind of like a general, I don't know, go Buddhist, go whichever route you want to go with it. And I think there's truth to that. And that doesn't have to necessarily be hopefully at the end of our all very long lived full life. I think, again, what's so lacking in our world today is personal connection. And while it can be draining on you as a giver, there will be times that people give back into you. And I definitely have received that. It's not lost on me. The people and the relationships that I not only had prior to the loss of my husband, but it has like tripled, quadrupled since his death. And so in a bizarre way, I guess that's something that has helped me. Yes, I'm an introvert and I recharge by being alone, but I'm also very aware that my world is very full, and most people's can be too, if you just look up.
Yeah. We have a misconception with introvert and extrovert, meaning that like a lot of people think that I'm an introvert, I'm always by myself, or I'm extrovert, I'm always surrounded by everybody. Like you can dip back and forth in both. I'm right there with you. Like one of the greatest things that I look forward to is just being with my wife. Like I love being able to connect on this project, being able to welcome people to the in-home studio. But at the end of the day, like if there's one thing I enjoy, it's my own mindful photography sessions or just being by myself in my home. Like that's the beauty of understanding what pours back into you. Like when you're dealing with grief, dealing with trauma, and you need to find comfort, it's okay to go after the things that revitalize you, re-energize you. In fact, you need to. Like you're not going to be of help or benefit to anybody else if you burn out. Just like if you burn out at work, you can burn out in caregiving. And that's one of the things that we actually have a huge issue with, caregiver burnout in this country. There's a lot of people that are constantly pouring out and they're not doing enough to take care of themselves.
Yeah.
And when it comes to being able to navigate these types of situations, there's so many different tools out there. And one of the most villainized or maybe misunderstood is plant medicine. Things like, being able to go out of the United States and do ayahuasca is something that has recently become very popular and insanely successful for a lot of people. And I know that you've had an experience. Is this something you'd be willing to talk about?
Sure. Yeah, I'll talk about it.
Awesome. What was that journey like for you?
Well, I'll say this. I've done a lot of things as it pertains to my healing, because as we've said, I'm a stove toucher. So just to give a little bit of anybody who might be listening, what I've done. I took a trip to Bali. I got tattoos. I saw a therapist regularly. I went to an intensive therapeutic retreat in the mountains of Tennessee for a week, and I worked one-on-one with a therapist up to 6 hours a day. I rode my skateboard. I hung out with friends. I avoided my friends. I drank probably a little too much. I didn't drink at all. I bought a pig, like literally bought a pig. I met with a medium to see if I could connect with Chad. You name it, I've probably tried to do. Read books, listen to podcasts. Like I was doing all the things. I like to think that I've always been fairly insightful within myself and, have a fair amount of emotional intelligence as it pertains to myself. So I was a little bit like on this quest, which I think, again, goes back to my background of the way I was raised and the way Chad was. And we were kind of like, all right, here's the problem. What are you going to do about it? But finally deciding to go do plant medicine. And I know that there's people who feel very strongly against it. And what I will say is, I believe that plant medicine is for anybody. It's not for everybody. And listen to that closely. I think it's a personal choice, and I respect the fact that people may not want to choose it. And there's other avenues in terms of healing to go down. But for me, plant medicine just seemed like the best option. I've done a couple different journeys. I've done Ibogaine and 5-MeO-DMT, which was done out of the country. And then, well, all of it was really done out of the country, but different locations. I've also done psilocybin and MDMA. And I know that Ibogaine and ayahuasca, which I have not done, and iboga are ones that have proven to be very therapeutic, especially for our veterans that have seen war. I found it to be a good, valuable experience for me, but it didn't really hit the way I thought it would. I don't regret it. I don't feel like I need to do that again. But when we're talking about, and this is just my own thoughts, veterans doing Ibogaine to challenge maybe their childhood past or their war experience, I can see how it would be applicable. I will say that I came from a pretty idyllic childhood, and I'm very grateful for it. I didn't have a lot of that in my past that was troubling. I also haven't seen war firsthand. I was dealing with true just heartbreak, like earth-shattering heartbreak for the love of your life that was really just came out of nowhere. So what I have found to be the most beneficial for me has been psilocybin and MDMA. It's allowed me to kind of look back into myself, at my ego and my subconscious, and it's really alleviated some of the pain and the hurt I feel from the loss, which comes up still. But it's allowed me in a lot of ways to kind of timestamp Chad in the love that I feel versus it always feeling so shame and guilt ridden.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
No, absolutely. That's one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about is that guilt and lingering shame, that pain that we can't seem to remove no matter how hard we try. I could have done something. I could have been there. Monday morning quarterbacking for so many of us is a real painful issue that we deal with along with moral injury. And it's so intimately linked to that loss, and it stays with us, and it just gnaws at us over and over again. And how do you find yourself running away from that? Or did you finally find yourself staring it down and understanding like, hey, this is not my fault. This is not something that I can beat myself up over and over again?
This is kind of one of those boomerang emotions we were talking about earlier. I read in a book one time, it said something to the effect that your subconscious doesn't care about facts. And I was like, huh, because if we had Chad's brain donated to research, I know that he had injuries to his brain. And one would say, hey, he had physical wounds on the brain that manifested itself into a multitude of problems, to include a mental struggle. And that's why he made this decision and he took his life. So facts, right? But the unconscious doesn't care about facts. And what my unconscious mind constantly tells me is that he was my best friend. He was the love of my life. I would have done absolutely anything to help him and save him. And what my unconscious mind also says is that if he, and this is literally what my brain says to me, like if he made the choice to leave, it was almost like a betrayal against you. You weren't doing enough. He didn't trust you. He didn't feel safe with you. There's shame involved in that. And I would be lying if I didn't say that pops in my head on a pretty regular basis. But I think in the beginning of my grief, where it was literal turmoil, I mean, if I could just have someone feel the way I felt of this just constant, like, hamster wheel in your brain. And it was so punishing to myself. And kind of like you were saying earlier, talking to a therapist and, getting some things off your chest. I always use the analogy of letting air out of the balloon. So it was like, if we overfill a balloon, what do? We like pinch the sides and like let some air out. And in the beginning of my grief, I was so filled with shame and guilt and kind of embarrassment and sadness and anger that I kind of just unleashed on people that were in my path. I was an asshole. And it kind of got to the point where it's like, I can't live like this, which then obviously led me down the path to search out for all this healing. However, with all that said, just 2 days ago, I was driving in the car and those exact thoughts popped up. It was like, wow, it's been 5 years. Like, look at all that I've done. And I think that also plays into why was I so fast forward to speak out, be an advocate, those sort of things. Is in the beginning, I think it was the only way I felt that I could still express love to Chad. Yeah. And what I've finally kind of come full circle on is I don't need to do that anymore to express that love. Like, I just know where it sits with me. So yeah, but it's still that shame and guilt. And, I can't speak for all families that have experienced a loss, or especially a loss like the one I have. But, I imagine they all carry that a little bit differently.
Yeah. How does self-compassion show in your life these days? And the reason I ask that is because I'm a big friggin' fan of Dr. Kristen Neff and her work on self-compassion, and having practiced it, understanding like how important it is, especially when dealing with trauma, guilt, moral injury. But it's hard to cultivate. Like our demographic, our type of people, we're really hard on ourselves. And that's like one of the first things I always reflect on. Like, how does self-compassion show up in your life? How are you willing to extend that little bit of like positive love affirmation on a daily basis?
I don't know. I mean, I would be curious what she would say to my answer on this, but I think my self-compassion is when I give in to others. That's when I feel, I mean, I've been told I'm loud, I'm unapproachable, I have a lot to say, and I'm bold. None of those were meant to be compliments when they were told to me, but I took them as compliments. I was like, all right. And, maybe I come off that way but I also know I'm super, super sensitive. So I don't know if I have a great answer. I mean, I think we all struggle with it.
Yeah.
Um, I do think I did a bunch of writing the other day because I was walking down the street and I kind of had this like a personal epiphany. And I do think it's gotten better for me as I've gotten older. Maybe it's my loss, maybe it's becoming an empty nester, which probably has been one of the second most hardest things I've had to do. But kind of coming full circle where, at almost 47 years old, I really like myself. I do. I like who I am. And to be able to say that and be okay with it, that feels pretty good. So
that is a huge achievement that so many of us never get a chance to really truly understand how important it is. That a lot of people in the military, especially in the elite groups within special forces, Rangers, Navy SEALs, we are self-loathers, and we just we're the first ones to cheer on a friend, a counterpart, and love on everybody else, but we are hard on ourselves. And being able to sit down and say, wow, like, I love who I am, I love and I'm proud of everything I've accomplished, that's really fucking hard. But it's such a go ahead.
Oh, it's just hard, and it goes against everything that you all have been trained to do. Yeah. I mean, I've said this multiple times, but the things that make special operators great and excel are potentially the same exact things that will lead to their demise.
Bingo.
I mean, and so it's like, how do you deprogram that? I don't know if this is a good place to segue to this, but I would even go a step further and say, where we know one of the most sensitive times are for our military service members, and specifically special operators, is transitioning. Yep. Whether it's transitioning to a different command or duty station, but really transitioning out, leaving. Because when you leave, you feel like a quitter. You feel like you're leaving your buddies behind. You're not going to be part of a team. How am I going to recreate that in the civilian world? I mean, you've reached here. What can I do to go here? And so they leave. And while there's a lot of transition programs out there and people that assist with this process, which I think is wonderful and needed, and they do great things, I almost feel like the conversation needs to be different. Yep. And I don't necessarily think that we need to encourage people to spin 180 and go get an MBA or go, for the 6-figure job or whatever. Like, that will still be there because you will always have the title of being this under your belt. I almost, if we want to support the service members or their family and friends that are trying to support them, sometimes that might include us encourage them to just take a beat. Yeah. Just take a minute. And I realize finances are involved in that, and not everybody has perhaps the financial ability to leave the military and not start a 6-figure job right away. But in whatever way you could maybe make that look for you, a month, 6 months, a year, I don't know. I think there could be some great magic that happens in the times that those people take a minute.
Absolutely. I champion that same concept every single day, talking and coaching guys through transition. There's ways you can do it. Look at your debt. Look at your income. We never talk about budget. The vast majority of us leave the budget up to the wife. That's, hey, she'll take care of the money. No. Take an active approach in your budget. Look what you can pay off if you start planning for your transition 2-3 years before you do it. Pay things off, get rid of things, jettison everything you don't need, and look at, hey, can I float? Can I build a runway of cash for a year, 2 years? I know a Navy SEAL right now, Liam Cogan, who is traveling around the world doing amazing things, doing whatever he wants to do, and he's passionate about it, and he found a way to make money. Like, that is beautiful. he executed a plan that was all for him, what he wants to do. But nobody wants to tell us to take time out to cultivate an identity, a passion, a purpose. Wow, that's cool. It's the first time I did that. Awesome. Hand signatures, badass. Find what you're passionate about. Find out what you really want to do. And if it's a being of service to other people, there's a million ways to do that right now. And you can do it. Nobody wants to tell us that, hey, you can go out there and start a podcast. You can go out there and start a YouTube channel, a Twitch channel. Dude, maybe it's not forever. Maybe it's not profit work that you want to go into and do a couple years of volunteer work. You owe yourself and your family that time to figure out what you really like and what you really enjoy, and then write it all out. And before you know it, maybe you are going through VR&E to become a doctor, because fun fact, they'll pay for that. Or a lawyer, they'll pay for that. And then you're going to school and getting paid to do it. But we like to put ourselves, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you're good. The military guy, I say guys just because that's generally my population. This is not against women, men. They ride the red line so long, but so does the family, right?
Yes.
I mean, your family is in it too. Your family, as far as I'm concerned, your family is serving. And I realize they're not overseas in the,
but they
like outstations and all this sort of stuff. But, I mean, everybody has served. And so maybe that's part of the conversation, is targeting it that way. Like, it's not just you that needs a beat. It's your family members need a second, to take a knee and just like shake it out. And that's coming from someone who, I feel like I'm pretty driven and I like to achieve. I know Chad was very driven and likes to achieve. So it's hard to say that, but I think it's ridiculous to think that you can ride the red line through a full career in the military and then transition, and you're potentially kind of recreating that at times in the civilian sector, whether it is, the MBA, the investment firm, the six figures. It's just, but then again, I lived part of my life in a van, so I don't know if people want to listen to me. But
but that's pretty fucking cool. I mean, let's talk to that. How did that come about? How did that idea? I mean, it's everywhere, but still, it doesn't matter how many people do it. How did that become a reality for you?
Well, I'll squash that bug right now, that van life is not what you see on Instagram. I feel like I need to change my Instagram to target what true van life can be. But
please.
So one of the things I did for healing was I always wanted to see the Pacific Northwest. I just had never been there. And I wanted to do it in a camper van, and I found a company, and I used Chad's huge Patagonia massive duffel I wore as a backpack. I packed basically just what I needed. I flew into Seattle, picked up my camper van, and I spent 10 days driving through the Pacific Northwest with one rule, and it was to speak to as little people as possible. And I think I had three conversations in 10 days. And that doesn't count like the grocery store clerk or something, but yeah, literally 3 conversations, because I think at that point I just wanted to be very internal. And what's cool about that is I have some really great stories, which should be for another time. But what's cool about that is, if you really think about it, the less you talk, the more other people do. So the things I learned about people at campsites, and they just tell you all kinds of stuff about their life and how little to nothing they knew about me. And I found that to be great. But anyway, before I even made it through the trip, I was to return in San Francisco. I was sitting in a little camp spot in Bandon, Oregon, which is beautiful if I've never been. And I was already researching vans and how to have my own. And again, I think we all are very much kind of products of our foundation, and our foundation being our youth and our upbringing. And I think what I was reverting back to is I just don't need that much. I'm not personally, I'm not a stuff person. I don't really need the big house or the fancy cars or the watches or the whatever, I don't know, name it. I just wanted less. And I probably wanted less because I was carrying that emotional rucksack that was so damn big, it couldn't fit really anywhere either. So I got this van, built the van out and had it done, I think, finally in January of 2021, and then took off cross country later that year. Spent some time living on Ocean Drive down from the Dell in Coronado in my van and just kind of bouncing around. And I love the freedom it provides. I loved the anonymity. And what I mean by that is not like I'm somebody. I mean it more like, living in Virginia Beach is where Chad and I lived for so long. And it's the closest thing to a home that we have because we were military kids too. So we've never lived anywhere that long. It's a great town. It was a great place to raise our kids. We have great friends and family there. But once he died, it just felt so heavy to me there. And I would go in stores and you run into people and it was, everyone knew your story. And being in the van provided me the ability to not have that or carry that. No one knew me from Adam. And so it was good. It opened up a little bit of my bandwidth. But then here's the interesting thing. So I've been fortunate enough, and I say fortunate because I'm traveling right now. I travel around. I went out to California this past year, rented a little place because I thought I might want to live there. Been there, been in the van, figuring out where I'm going to go next. And what I realized is this is where I recognize I still have quite a bit of healing to do because I kept trying to change my location. But every time I changed my location, I was still there. So it's like, well, it's not really getting better. It's cool to be these places, but why do I still feel this way? And I still feel this way because, as the Trevor Hall song goes, put down what you're carrying, and it's, so yeah, the van is great and I'll probably go back in it starting in May and be in there for a while.
Yeah.
Bump around.
I think that you just highlighted something that so many of us spend years and decades trying to identify why it doesn't feel right, why this place doesn't feel right, this job doesn't turn out, and then I move here and I can't make it work right here. Well, look inward. That reflection, that deep work. If we don't pause and look inside and really address those issues, like we're gonna constantly be searching for a home and never realizing what's going on inside. Like that's powerful. It's just a lot of guys and gals need to hear that.
And that's why that's just more testimony for therapy too. My therapist who I love, and I always tell her I want to shrink her down and just like put her in my pocket and just carry her with me everywhere. I haven't been able to see her since I've been out west, and I recently was able to return back to Virginia for a few weeks, and I went to go see her. And I told her about something that had happened while I was gone that made me really, really upset. And it was one of those things where you're like, why am I so upset about this? I kept asking myself, like, why is this bothering me so much? But I think because of so much therapy that I've done, and not just specific to Chad and my loss, but just as a person, it gives you the tools to like take a minute and kind of sit back and kind of evaluate yourself and be like, all right, this is how I'm feeling because of this. And I know I get this way sometimes because of this, and what will make this better. And you kind of can work through your own little personal worksheet because you've built these tools with this therapist.
Yeah.
And so like, to speak to anyone who might be listening, you don't necessarily have to experience a tragic loss. It's really about talking to someone so you can better kind of dissect yourself as a human and understand where your strengths are. But people should also have a pretty good working knowledge on where their weaknesses are. And I don't think just because they're weaknesses means that you need to like overcome them and be better. You just sometimes need to recognize like, yeah, I'm not very good at that. Like,
Yeah.
like be okay saying like, yeah, I'm not good at that.
Yeah. It's therapy gets a bad rap because somewhere along the line, we had this idea that if you go to a therapist, you're going to have to go see them every single day for the rest of your life. And that's not a reality. Mental health is a journey. And you're on that road and maybe you veer off into an unknown dirt road and you blow out a tire and then you need help. Of course, you're going to ask for help. You sit down and talk to a therapist, and therapy is never supposed to be a consistent thing. You set goals and objectives. And like once you meet them and you're back on the road, the therapist says, hey, you're doing good. Take off, go on your own. If you ever find yourself lost again, hey, feel free to come back. And that's the beauty of it. You don't have to feel like you're, beholden to this one therapist for the rest of your life. Like, no, you go. Yeah. And then when you stumble and you're like, ah, shit, like kind of having panic attacks again, or my depression's going haywire again, I'm going to reach back out to my therapist. And there's nothing wrong with that. And you high five, make another list of objectives, and then you go at it again.
Well, let's talk about this then, because when people talk about mental health, it's always referred to as a negative, a deficit, a less than. But here's the interesting thing. We're all born with like a brain and emotions. Mm-hmm. We're also all born with muscles and bones. I wasn't born to deadlift 250 pounds, but I did now. I wasn't born to do pull-ups, but I can do them now. And so I wish somehow we could turn the tide a little bit. It's like the same reason you go to the gym for health and wellness in terms of bone and muscle structure. You should be working on your mental health, not because you necessarily have a struggle and we know that some people are, maybe biologically predisposed to mental health conditions for sure. But we should focus on mental health because it's health, and focusing on it will make you mentally stronger.
Yeah.
Why is this hard to understand? Yeah. I don't mean to you. I mean like for the world.
No, sir, I understand it.
Why are we talking about it this way? So it's just frustrating to me.
It's crazy. I think with the promotion and advocacy for things like positive psychology, understanding that like we don't have to always just look at the negatives of traditional psychological care. Like people hear DSM-5 and they're like, oh my God, there's someone's going to diagnose me with something. It's like, okay, maybe, or maybe you'll be able to sit down and work through something that you haven't been able to work through because of something you experienced. Or maybe you're learning how to optimize your ability to deal with stress, because guess what? As much as these gurus online want to tell you that you can have a stress-free 2024, stress is part of life. Anxiety is part of life. It's how we deal with it. It's how we understand that I don't have to squeeze onto and try to control this worry about a test or worry about a meeting with my boss. Like, wait a second. Like, no, I don't have to control this. I can let it go because the only thing I can affect is right now in the present moment. I can't worry about tomorrow's meeting or the meeting that I may have botched last week. It's over. It's done.
Yeah.
But nobody is there to tell us this unless we're willing to go in and sit down and talk to somebody that has the tools and weaponry to help us combat this. And that's a beautiful thing. Once you realize that, there's no stigma around it. Like it's one of the greatest resources that does work. It's just being able to talk. And now we have peer-to-peer support groups. We have people that have lived and done exactly what we've been through, and we don't have to feel so alone by talking to somebody that maybe doesn't understand us. Like there's tons of resources out there. And it's just as simple as having a talk with somebody. Sometimes you just need to talk with your best friend. As long as they're actively listening and not trying to solve the problem for you, that could be really a helpful tool too.
Yeah. I think we just live in like an all or nothing world.
Yeah.
And it's all or nothing. I think I recently posted a thing about this, but if you go on any platform right now and you look at, mental health and being the best you, and we're just inundated with these things,
Yeah.
I think everybody is saying some really great things. It's meditate, breath work, cold plunges, sauna, get massages, maybe do acupuncture. How about plant medicine? The list is really long, but where we get in trouble with the all or nothing mentality is that people think I have to either do all of this or none of it. And I'm sitting here thinking like maybe that pertains to some of my self-care, and that I'm just like, yeah, I don't. And I don't meaning not that I don't do any of that. I don't overwhelm myself with trying to meet every single wicket. I'll tell you right now, and this is nothing against this community. I cannot do yoga. I just can't. It just drives me crazy. And I tried it, and that's not for me.
No.
It is for other people. And if it's what they like to do, I'm like, yeah, go do that. But because of my self-awareness, I know that I am not going to be a good time on a mat next to you in your yoga. I'm going to crush it. You're going to hate it. Like I'm going to be complaining. And so I don't do yoga, but I do other things. And I think encouraging people, your health is this giant continuum. It's like your personal umbrella, and you need to decide what you want in your umbrella, and just focus on that. Do you?
Yeah.
That
is so true. What about mindfulness? Have you dove into that at all in your journey? That's one of the things I have found to be extremely helpful.
Well, tell me how you have, and so I can better understand, because.
So cultivating that present moment awareness, understanding how to sit down and redirect your mind instead of constantly being in that rumination mode, constantly worrying, constantly stressing, and it starts with just as simple as doing your focus on your breath meditation and redirecting your thoughts, and then practicing mindful eating and body scan meditations. But at the core of it, it's simply being able to observe your thoughts, observe your surroundings, and understand to let go of controlling and judgment and just be present. And that's been one of the biggest things, because the one thing that I couldn't do was let go of anxiety and depression, because it was all linked to either focusing on the future, which is the anxiety, or being depressed about the past. And that's how mindfulness has become like, I got my certifications, I teach it now. Now it's become a great source of healing for me. And I'm always curious seeing if other people have tapped into it in their own journeys.
I've dabbled with it. I will say that's part of my problem probably with yoga, is like I sit there and I'm like, how much longer, And again, I do have a hard time because my mind goes really, really fast. I know even sometimes when you're talking to someone who talks slower, I'm like, yep, I got it.
Get the words out faster.
Yeah. Like just what? Again, it's something I'm not that great at, I'm not very patient for sure. So mindfulness, for a while, I was doing an exercise when I was back in Virginia and working out at the gym. As I would, after my workout, I would sit down just in the gym, in the busy, crowded gym, and I would sit cross-legged. This is a thing from Melissa Urban. And that's when I would do it. I would just sit really quiet, and you could hear all the things happening in the gym. And that was a good practice. That was challenging for me. And I don't know if this counts, but I think most of my mindfulness happens, meaning I can just really kind of take a look in about what I'm thinking about and what's bothering me, is usually when I walk. So obviously I walk a fair amount with a rucker, go ruck. And, it's because I kind of, it helps me to move, but I can move and not have to talk to anyone and just walk through the neighborhood or wherever I am and just kind of think about the week that just passed, any conversations I had, how do I feel, what's maybe keeps coming up that I get same thing kind of anxious about, or reoccurring thoughts. But I would say for me, it's probably more active, and I don't know if that's necessarily the best thing. it would probably be better if I challenged myself with what's hard for me, and that is sitting still. But so maybe I should take that challenge.
Yeah,
after
I'm
we
telling
get
you,
off.
and this is truth. It's scientific. 12 minutes a day. Start with 12 minutes a day. Eyes open meditation. I know. Hey, look, I hold my clients to the same standard. Like, start with small, 12 minutes. Then do maybe mindful eating. Turn everything off and just focus on eating slowly. And I get met with the same looks of sarcasm. Like, yeah, I'm going to sit there and eat slowly. I'm like, yeah, look, I get it. I live the same life. You just eat really rapidly and you move on to the next thing. But bringing that present moment awareness to everything that you're doing allows you to finally understand the importance of being there, aware. Like, I would send emails before and not realize I sent the wrong email to the wrong person about a completely different topic because I'm just constantly scatterbrained. I'm living like trying to play 3D chess. And with mindfulness, I stopped doing that. What are my hard do-outs? And then when I look at my calendar and realize, like, okay, no, what's more important? Getting my workout, my meditation in, or struggling and stressing about this shit? I don't have and here's a fun fact about Security Hall Media. I'm the fucking boss. So if I don't want to do something that day, I don't fucking do it, because it's more important for me to get those things that revitalize and pour back into me, like being with my wife, than sitting down and being frustrated about a stupid social media post. Screw it. Live in today. Live in the present moment, because, hey, fun fact, at some point, it all ends. At some point, that timer that's above our heads, it expires. And I don't want to go out missing out. I want to live my life to the full extent. And no one's going to give two shits about that meme that I don't post. But you know what? I will care if I missed out on 45 minutes with my wife, being able to do something and enjoy life, or go fishing, or go do photography. Live life to the fullest. We made it through the worst of it. We made it through the worst. Now we get to enjoy life. Sara, thank you for being here today. Thank you for being brave and bold and sharing your journey with thousands of us across platforms, videos, and being an advocate. But before I let you go, in this new season of your life, what are you doing? What is the new motto? What is the new thing that you're excited about?
Am I allowed to use cuss words?
Absolutely.
No, I jokingly say, I've lately just put a lot more things in the fuck it bucket. Just fills up. It's like, fuck it. Overall, I would say I'm a person who I've really learned what matters, kind of to your point you were making a minute ago. There's just, again, for me, it was having a loss like this, and you just realize, like, there's just a lot of shit I don't worry about, and don't care. But I think for me, it's trying to give back to myself a little bit more, because again, I've given up a lot of myself, especially in the last 5 years. And trying to, I always use the example of grief as like a flour sifter, and there's just these big rock boulders of flour, and you're just kind of sifting through it. And it's getting a little easier to sift. And so just trying to revisit what could be next for me in my life moving forward. My kids are, for the most part, grown and flown. They don't live at home with me anymore, and I love any moment I get with them, but really trying to think of, I like to think that we all are versions of multi-potentialites, meaning you can do and be a lot of things in this lifetime if you open the door. And that's kind of what I'm trying to figure out. It's what will I do next? I will always care about veterans, and there will always be a part of me championing for them. But I don't want that to be my only purpose moving forward.
Absolutely. Sara, thank you so much. That's like,
thanks,
the realest fucking answer ever. It's time for Sara 3.0, and I'm here for it. I'm excited to see where you go next, and I think everybody else will be there cheering you on. So, Sara, thank you for coming on today, and I can't wait to see what you got next. Everybody listening at home, take a few moments for yourself today. Practice some self-compassion, or not. Either way, hope you have a great day, and we'll see you all next time. Till then, take care. you like what we're doing and you're enjoying the show, don't forget to share us, like us, subscribe, and head on over to our Patreon where you can be part of our community and get access to all of our episodes as soon as they drop. And remember, we get through this together. Take care.